The distress signal reached Fleet Command at 3:47 Galactic Standard Time. Commander Jake Morrison barely had time to register the coordinates before his console erupted with priority alerts. The mining colony on Veridian 7 was under attack, and from the scattered reports flooding in, it was bad. Morrison leaned forward, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. 23,000 civilians, mostly families. The Krell battlecruiser had appeared without warning, its weapons already hot. The colony's shields were failing. He pulled up the tactical display. The nearest military vessels were 4 hours out at maximum burn. The colony had maybe 20 minutes before the Krell broke through their defenses completely. Morrison's jaw tightened. 4 hours might as well be 4 years. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Amy Sullivan, appeared at his shoulder. Her face was pale in the blue light of the command center. She had already run the numbers. They both knew what those numbers meant. The communication officer looked up from his station. The voice of Governor Lisa Martinez crackled through the speakers, barely audible over the sound of explosions in the background. Her words were clipped, professional, but Morrison could hear the fear underneath. Morrison made a decision that would echo across the galaxy for years to come. He opened a secure channel that most officers didn't even know existed. The encryption was so advanced that it took 30 seconds just to establish the connection. When the line finally opened, there was only silence on the other end. No greeting, no identification, just waiting. He took a breath and spoke the words he had hoped never to say. The protocol was simple, direct, and terrifying in its implications. When he finished, the line went dead without acknowledgement. Morrison stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Sullivan moved closer. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she asked if he was sure about what he had just done. Morrison didn't answer right away. He pulled up the file that officially didn't exist, the one that only a handful of people in the entire Galactic Council had clearance to read. The words on the screen seemed to glow in the darkness. The Krell commander, Warlord Zarketh, watched the colony's shields flicker and fail through the viewscreen of his flagship. His mandibles clicked together in satisfaction. Another human settlement would fall, another message sent to the upstart species that had dared to claim territory in Krell space. The fact that the territory had been legally purchased through council arbitration meant nothing to Zarketh. Humans were weak, their military scattered and unimpressive. He had destroyed 3 human outposts in the past month. Each time, their military had arrived too late, moving through space at their pathetically slow speeds. The humans talked constantly of peace and diplomacy, but they lacked the strength to back up their words. It made them easy prey. His tactical officer reported that the colony's defense platforms were down, shields at 12% and falling. It would be over in minutes. Zarketh ordered his ships to target the evacuation shuttles next. Let the humans watch their families die. Let them understand what it meant to challenge the Krell Empire. On the surface of Veridian 7, Lisa Martinez was coordinating the evacuation even as the building shook around her. Debris fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered. Through the window, she could see the civilian transport ships struggling to launch through the bombardment. Too many people. Not enough ships. Not enough time. Her deputy, Carl Bennett, was shouting something about the eastern sector, but his words were lost in another explosion. Martinez grabbed the edge of her desk as the floor tilted. Her daughter was at the school on the other side of the colony, the school that had just appeared on her damage report screen with a red indicator. She forced herself to focus. Thousands of people were depending on her. She couldn't afford to think about one child, even if that child was her own. She pulled up the evacuation routes, trying to find a way to get more people out. There wasn't one. The math was brutal and unforgiving. Back on Fleet Command, Morrison stood before the main view screen, watching the tactical feed from Veridian 7. The colony was dying. Every second brought more casualties. Sullivan stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. The rest of the command crew worked in tense silence, trying to find solutions that didn't exist. Then something changed. The sensor officer straightened suddenly. Her voice carried across the command center as she reported an anomaly. Morrison turned. Sensor display showed a spike in gravitational readings 3 light seconds from Veridian 7. The kind of readings that usually meant a ship was about to drop out of faster-than-light travel. But the readings were wrong, too strong, too concentrated. Sullivan pulled up the data on her personal screen. Her eyes widened. She looked at Morrison. He nodded slowly. They were coming. On the Krell flagship, the science officer's report made Zarkith pause in the middle of issuing orders. A spatial anomaly. Something was entering normal space. The readings didn't match any known vessel profile. Zarkith ordered his ships to maintain their bombardment while his tactical team identified the new arrival. The anomaly resolved into something physical. At first, Zarkith thought his sensors were malfunctioning. The object that appeared was too small. A single ship. Not even a large one by Krell standards. It hung in space between his fleet and the dying colony, making no aggressive moves. Making no moves at all. Just waiting. Zarkith ordered a scan. The ship's hull was strange, composed of materials that seemed to absorb and reflect their sensor beams simultaneously. No visible weapons, no shield emissions, no identification transponder. His tactical officer suggested it might be a scout vessel. The Krell warlord made a dismissive gesture. One ship. What could one ship do against his entire battle group? He ordered a warning shot. A plasma bolt lanced out from one of his destroyers, brilliant orange against the black of space. It struck the unknown vessel dead center. The bolt dissipated, not absorbed, not reflected. It simply stopped existing when it touched the ship's hull. The energy vanished as if it had never been. Zarkith stood from his command throne. His tactical officer was talking rapidly, but the warlord wasn't listening. He was watching the small ship that shouldn't have been able to do what it just did. His instincts, honed through decades of warfare, were suddenly screaming at him. The unknown vessel came to life. It moved in a way that made Zarkith's eyes hurt to track, not fast exactly. It simply stopped being in one place and started being in another with no visible transition between. It appeared next to one of his destroyers. The destroyer opened fire at point-blank range. The small ship didn't fire back. It didn't need to. The destroyer's weapon struck its own shields, reflected back with somehow more force than they had been fired with. The Krell ship's shields collapsed instantly. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull. It went dead in space, all power gone. Zarkith ordered all ships to concentrate fire. 15 warships opened up simultaneously. The space between them and the target lit up with enough energy to crack a moon. The unknown vessel sat in the center of the firestorm, completely unaffected. Then it moved. One by one, the Krell ships went dark. The small vessel appeared next to each in turn, and each time the targeted ship simply stopped. No explosions, no debris, just sudden total systems failure. Engines dead, weapons dead, life support minimal. In less than 2 minutes, Zarkith's entire battle group was floating helpless. The unknown ship positioned itself between the disabled Krell fleet and Veridian 7. Then it broadcast a message. The transmission was in perfect Krell, but the voice that spoke was clearly human. Male comm, with an edge of something cold underneath. The voice identified itself as Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hayes of the Terran Defense Network. Zarkith had never heard of any such organization. Hayes explained in the same calm tone that the Krell fleet had approximately 4 hours to evacuate their disabled vessels before the human military arrived. He suggested they use that time wisely. Zarkith found his voice. He demanded to know what gave this Hayes the right to threaten the Krell Empire. What gave him the authority to attack without provocation? The response was immediate and chilling. Hayes explained that he had not attacked. He had defended. The Krell had fired first. As for authority, he operated under protocols that superseded normal military command structure, protocols that were activated only under specific circumstances. Circumstances that included the attempted genocide of civilian populations. The word genocide made Zarkith's blood run cold. Under Galactic Council law, genocide carried the most severe penalties, but this was a military operation, not genocide. He started to say as much. Hayes cut him off. The Krell had targeted evacuation shuttles carrying civilians. They had targeted schools and hospitals. The evidence was recorded and would be presented to the Council. But that was a matter for later. Right now, Zarkith needed to make a choice. The Krell warlord looked at his tactical display. All his ships were dead in space. The strange human vessel sat there, patiently waiting. He could try to restart his systems, try to fight back, but something in Hayes' tone told him that would be a fatal mistake. Zarkith gave the order to begin evacuation procedures. On Veridian 7, Martinez watched the skies clear. The bombardment had stopped. Her communications officer was reporting something impossible. The Krell fleet had been neutralized. A single human ship had appeared and disabled 15 warships in minutes. She didn't believe it until she saw the tactical feed herself. The evacuation continued, but now without the desperate urgency. Medical teams rushed to the damaged sectors. Martinez pulled up the location of her daughter's school. The building was damaged but standing. Emergency response teams were already on site. Her daughter was alive. Martinez collapsed into her chair, suddenly aware of how badly she was shaking. Bennett appeared with a cup of water. She took it with numb fingers. On her screen, the mysterious human ship continued its silent vigil, standing guard over the colony. Back at Fleet Command, Morrison was fielding urgent communications from a dozen different sources. The Galactic Council wanted answers. Allied governments wanted explanations. Everyone wanted to know what had just happened and what exactly the Terran Defense Network was. Sullivan pulled him aside. She asked the question that everyone was thinking. What had they just unleashed? Morrison looked at the classified file still open on his private screen. The file explained what the Terran Defense Network was, though the explanation raised more questions than it answered. The organization had been created during the early days of human expansion into space. Back when humanity had realized exactly how dangerous the galaxy could be. Back when they had understood that their slower-than-light military could not protect their far-flung colonies. The solution had been radical and kept absolutely secret. Humanity had poured resources into developing technology that other species had declared impossible. Faster-than-light travel that didn't rely on conventional jump drives. Weapons that could disable rather than destroy. Defense systems that made attacking them suicidal. They had taken the best scientists, the best engineers, and given them unlimited budgets and no oversight. The result was a fleet that officially didn't exist. A fleet that operated outside normal chains of command. A fleet that could go from any human world to any other in hours instead of weeks. A fleet that had been waiting, hidden, for the moment when they would be needed. Morrison explained all this to Sullivan in quiet tones. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked why the program had been kept secret. Morrison's answer was simple, because it would have terrified everyone. The galaxy had grown accustomed to thinking of humans as weak, as peaceful diplomats who preferred negotiation to warfare, as a species that could be pushed around, their territories encroached upon, their colonies threatened. It had suited humanity to encourage that perception. It had bought them time to develop the defense network. Time to deploy vessels to every major human settlement, time to establish protocols and training programs, time to prepare for the day when someone would push too hard and humanity would have to show its teeth. That day had arrived. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 3 days later. Representatives from 200 species filled the great chamber. The human ambassador, Victoria Chen, stood at the center podium. The entire galaxy was watching. The Krell Empire had filed a formal complaint. They claimed humanity had deployed illegal weapons, had violated council regulations regarding military technology, had acted with disproportionate force. The evidence they presented was the recording from Zarkith's flagship, showing the impossible performance of the defense network vessel. Chen listened to the accusations without expression. When the Krell representative finished, she requested permission to present the human response. Council speaker granted it. Chen activated a holographic display. The display showed the attack on Veridian 7 from multiple angles, the targeting of civilian evacuation ships, the bombardment of schools and hospitals, the systematic destruction of a defenseless colony. Chen let the images speak for themselves. Then she presented the response. A single ship arriving, defensive actions only. No Krell casualties, every disabled vessel left with power for life support and communications. a measured, proportional response to an act of genocide. The Krell representative started to object. Chen cut him off. She presented the council with a choice. They could debate the legality of human defensive technology, or they could address the fact that a council member species had just attempted to commit genocide against civilians. The chamber erupted in discussion. Species that had been allied with the Krell began to distance themselves. Others who had considered humanity weak prey began to reevaluate their positions. Chen stood calmly at the podium, waiting for order to be restored. The council speaker called for quiet. When the chamber had settled, Chen continued. She explained that humanity had always preferred peace, had always sought diplomatic solutions, but they were not naive. They had prepared for the possibility that someone would mistake their preference for peace as an inability to fight. The Terran Defense Network existed to protect human civilians. Nothing more, nothing less. It would not be used for conquest. It would not be used for intimidation. It would respond only to direct threats against human lives, and it would respond with the minimum force necessary to eliminate those threats. Chen then did something that shocked the council. She provided technical specifications. Not complete blueprints, but enough information to prove that every system on the Defense Network vessels complied with council regulations. The faster-than-light drives used principles that were theoretically possible but practically difficult. The defensive technology was exactly that, defensive. The weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. Everything was legal. Everything was within the parameters of council law. Humanity had simply been better at implementation than anyone else. The vote that followed was not even close. The Krell Empire was censured. Zarkith was stripped of his rank and turned over to council justice. The attack on Veridian 7 was classified as an attempted genocide, with all the legal consequences that entailed, and humanity's right to maintain its defense network was officially recognized. But the real impact came in the days and weeks that followed. Species that had been quietly planning incursions into human space suddenly found urgent reasons to respect territorial boundaries. Pirates who had targeted human shipping lanes disappeared overnight. Border disputes that had been dragging on for years were suddenly resolved in humanity's favor. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity's peaceful nature was a choice, not a weakness, and choices could be changed. Ryan Hayes sat in the pilot seat of his vessel, designated as Defense Network 7. The ship was in standby mode, docked at one of the hidden stations that the network maintained throughout human space. His report on the Veridian 7 incident had been filed and acknowledged. The mission was complete. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Kate Morrison, daughter of Commander Jake Morrison, appeared from the crew quarters. She asked if he thought things would change now that the network was public knowledge. Hayes considered the question. He thought some things would change. The galaxy knew humanity had teeth now. That might make some species more cautious, but it might also make others more desperate or more aggressive. There would be attempts to steal the technology, efforts to develop counters. New threats would emerge, but the fundamental situation remained the same. Human colonies were scattered across hundreds of worlds. They needed protection. The defense network would provide that protection. And anyone who thought that humanity's revelation of the network meant they had shown all their cards was making a dangerous assumption. Kate smiled at that. She had seen the classified files that Hayes had clearance for. She knew about the projects still in development, the technologies still being tested, the capabilities that remained hidden. Defense Network 7 was impressive, but it was also 3 generations old. Hayes received a priority alert. Another colony was reporting unusual activity near its borders. Unidentified ships had been detected. It might be nothing. It might be something. Either way, the network would respond. That was their job. He began the power-up sequence. The ship came alive around him, systems activating with practiced efficiency. Kate took her station. The station commander cleared them for departure. Defense Network 7 slipped out of dock and vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving barely a ripple in space. On Veridian 7, life was returning to normal. The damaged buildings were being repaired. The casualties were being mourned. Lisa Martinez stood at the memorial service, her daughter beside her. They were alive because backup had arrived in time. Martinez had learned the name of the pilot who saved her colony, Ryan Hayes. She had tried to send a message of thanks, but it had been returned with a polite note explaining that Defense Network personnel did not accept personal commendations. They were just doing their job, Martinez supposed that was true, but it was a job that required incredible skill, advanced technology, and the willingness to face down impossible odds. It was a job that most people didn't even know existed until the moment they desperately needed it. She looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, hidden ships were standing guard. Silent sentinels protecting colonies they had never seen, people they had never met. It was both comforting and humbling to know they existed. At Fleet Command, Jake Morrison was reviewing deployment schedules. The official military was being reorganized to work in coordination with the Defense Network. It was a delicate process. Regular military personnel resented the network's secrecy and special status. Network personnel were uncomfortable with increased visibility, but it was necessary. The galaxy had changed. Humanity's position had changed. They could no longer rely on being underestimated. They needed to integrate their defensive capabilities more effectively. Morrison's daughter Kate was serving in the network. He understood both perspectives. Sullivan entered his office with another stack of reports. Intelligence was tracking increased military activity in several sectors. Species that had been hostile to humanity were accelerating their weapons development. The revelation of the Defense Network had started an arms race. Morrison had expected this. When you revealed strength, others sought to match it. The question was whether the galaxy would eventually reach a new equilibrium or whether tensions would escalate into open warfare. He hoped for the former but prepared for the latter. He pulled up the latest intelligence on the Krell Empire. Their military was in disarray after the Council's censure, but they had not accepted defeat gracefully. There were reports of secret shipyards, new weapons programs, alliances with other anti-human factions. The Krell would return. The only question was when and how, but Morrison was not particularly worried, because he knew what the Krell didn't. The Defense Network was not humanity's only secret. It was simply the first secret they had been forced to reveal. There were others. Contingencies within contingencies, defenses behind defenses. Humanity had learned its lessons well during its early ventures into space. They had learned that the galaxy was dangerous. That strength was the only guarantee of survival. That peace was something you built from a position of power, not weakness. And they had acted on those lessons with typical human thoroughness. The Defense Network was impressive, but it was also just the beginning. Victoria Chen sat in her office at the Council headquarters, reviewing the diplomatic fallout from the Viridian 7 incident. She had been humanity's ambassador for 12 years. She had spent most of that time carefully crafting an image of humans as peaceful, reasonable, and slightly naive. An image that encouraged other species to underestimate them. That image was now in ruins. The galaxy had seen what humanity was truly capable of. Chen should have been upset about years of diplomatic work being undone. Instead, she felt relieved. The charade had been exhausting, and ultimately it had been necessary only until humanity was strong enough to stand openly. That time had come, not because humanity wanted confrontation, but because someone had finally pushed hard enough to force their hand. The Krell had attacked civilians, had targeted children. That was a line that could not be crossed without response. Chen's communicator chimed. A request for a private meeting from the Vaxian ambassador. The Vaxians were one of the more powerful species in the Council. They had maintained a carefully neutral stance regarding humanity. The fact that their ambassador wanted to meet privately was significant. The meeting took place in a secure room. The Vaxian ambassador, a being named Thalrex, came directly to the point. His species had been aware that humanity was not as weak as they pretended. They had suspected hidden military capabilities. But they had not suspected the extent of those capabilities. Thalrex wanted to know humanity's intentions. Were they content to remain defensive, or would they begin expanding aggressively now that their strength was known? The question was reasonable. Chen gave an honest answer. Humanity had no desire for conquest. They had claimed the territories they needed for their growing population. They had established colonies that could be defended. Their goal was stability, not expansion. But they would not tolerate aggression against their people. The defense network existed to ensure that anyone who attacked human civilians would regret it immediately and completely. Thalrex considered this. He asked about the technology. How much more advanced was humanity compared to the rest of the council? Chen smiled. That was a question she would not answer. Some secrets needed to remain secret. But she assured him that humanity's technology was focused on defense, not offense. The Vaxian ambassador seemed satisfied with that non-answer. He proposed a formal alliance between their species. Not a military pact, but an agreement of mutual respect and cooperation. Chen accepted immediately. That was exactly the kind of relationship humanity wanted with the rest of the galaxy. Peaceful, profitable, built on mutual understanding rather than fear. After Thalrex left, Chen sat in silence for a long moment. The meeting had gone well, better than well. The Vaxians were influential. Their public alliance with humanity would encourage others to follow. The galaxy was beginning to adjust to the new reality. Ryan Hayes and Kate Morrison arrived at the colony that had reported unusual activity. Defense Network 7 dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge, sensors active. The unidentified ships were still there, holding position just outside the colony's sensor range. Hayes ran a full scan. 4 vessels, medium-sized. No weapons active but clearly military in design. No identification transponders. They were waiting for something. Hayes had a good idea what that something was. He opened a communication channel. The transmission was simple. This colony was under the protection of the Terran Defense Network. Any hostile action would be met with immediate response. The unidentified ships were advised to leave the system immediately. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the 4 ships turned and accelerated away, vanishing into faster-than-light travel without a word. Hayes marked the encounter in his log, pirates most likely, or scouts for a larger force. Either way, they had decided not to test the defense network today. Kate looked at the empty space where the ships had been. She noted that was easier than the Viridian 7 situation. Hayes agreed. Sometimes the threat of force was enough. Sometimes just being present prevented violence. Those were the best outcomes. No casualties, no destruction, just a clear demonstration that human colonies were not easy targets. But Hayes knew that not every encounter would end so peacefully. The galaxy was full of species and factions that valued strength. Now that humanity had demonstrated that strength, they would be tested again and again. Each time the defense network would respond. Each time they would send the same message. Attack human civilians, and you would face consequences that made the fight not worth fighting. The message was simple. The implications were profound. And slowly, grudgingly, the galaxy was learning to respect both. Years later, historians would point to the Viridian 7 incident as the moment when humanity's position in the galactic community fundamentally changed. Before, they had been seen as newcomers, weak and vulnerable. After, they were recognized as a major power, one that combined advanced technology with a willingness to use it in defense of their people. The incident spawned countless analyses. Military strategists studied the defense network's tactics. Scientists debated how humanity had achieved such technological advances. Diplomats parsed every word of Victoria Chen's speech to the council, looking for clues about humanity's future intentions. But the truth was simpler than all the elaborate theories. Humanity had done what it always did. When faced with a challenge, they adapted. When confronted with danger, they prepared. When threatened, they developed the means to defend themselves. And they did it quietly, patiently, without fanfare or boasting. The galaxy had mistaken that quiet patience for weakness. It was an error that would not be repeated, because now everyone knew the truth. When backup was called, what arrived was not a desperate last stand or a token force. What arrived was overwhelming, decisive capability deployed with precision and restraint. What arrived was humanity showing exactly what it meant to defend your own. And that terrified the entire galaxy because they realized they had been living next to a sleeping giant. A giant that preferred peace but was fully capable of war. A giant that had been watching, waiting, and preparing for the moment when someone would push too far. That moment had come. The giant had opened its eyes. And the galaxy would never be quite the same. In the end, the most terrifying thing was not the technology. It was not the speed of response or the effectiveness of the weapons. It was the realization that humanity had been hiding this capability for decades, that they had maintained absolute operational security across hundreds of worlds and thousands of personnel, that they had built an entire military branch in secret while the galaxy watched them and thought they knew what humanity was capable of. If humanity could hide something that significant, that game-changing, what else might they be hiding? What other capabilities remained in the shadows? What other surprises did they have prepared for anyone foolish enough to threaten them? Those questions kept military planners across the galaxy awake at night, because the answer was clearly not nothing. Humanity had proven they could keep secrets. They had proven they could develop advanced technology while maintaining perfect operational security. And they had proven that when they revealed that technology, it was only because the situation absolutely demanded it, which meant the defense network, as impressive as it was, might only be the tip of the iceberg, the part of humanity's capabilities that they were willing to show. And if that was just what they were willing to reveal, what nightmares remained hidden in classified facilities and secret shipyards? No one knew. And that uncertainty, more than any weapon or technology, was what truly terrified the galaxy, because humanity had taught everyone a lesson at Viridian 7. They had shown that sometimes the scariest thing was not what you could see. It was what you couldn't see but knew had to be there. The backup that arrived had saved a colony and disabled an entire battle group. But more importantly, it had sent a message that echoed across hundreds of worlds and thousands of species. A message written in disabled warships and averted genocide. A message that said humanity was done being underestimated, and the galaxy, for all its power and all its ancient civilizations, could do nothing but watch and learn and try to adjust to this new reality where the quiet species in the corner had teeth. Sharp teeth. Hidden teeth. Teeth they had been concealing while everyone assumed they were harmless. That was the real terror, not the technology itself, but the cold calculation it represented. The patience it required, the discipline it demanded. Humanity had looked at the galaxy, assessed the threats, and methodically built exactly what they needed to survive and thrive. Then they had hidden it until the perfect moment to reveal it for maximum impact. It was a level of strategic thinking that most species simply could not match. And now that the galaxy knew humanity possessed it, every interaction with humans took on a new dimension. What were they planning? What were they building? What would they reveal next? The questions hung in the air like a sword, and humanity, calm and quiet as always, simply continued their work, building, preparing, watching, and occasionally, when necessary, reminding everyone why it was better to be humanity's friend than their enemy. Because when humanity called for backup, what arrived was not hope. It was certainty. The certainty that whoever had threatened human lives would regret that decision. The certainty that the response would be overwhelming. And the certainty that this was only the beginning of what humanity could do if truly threatened. That was the lesson of Viridian 7. That was why the entire galaxy watched the footage of that single ship disabling 15 warships and felt cold fear settle in their hearts. Because they understood, finally, what humanity had been trying to tell them through decades of peaceful diplomacy. We prefer peace, but we are prepared for war. And if you force us to show you what we are truly capable of, you will wish you had listened when we were still asking nicely. The galaxy had not listened. Someone had to learn that lesson the hard way. The Krell had volunteered for that role by attacking Viridian 7, and now everyone else could learn from the Krell's mistake without having to make it themselves. It was, in its way, remarkably merciful. Humanity could have kept their capabilities hidden longer. Could have let more species attack before revealing the defense network, could have used the reveal to launch conquests or extract concessions. Instead, they had shown their strength at the first necessary moment, and then immediately returned to advocating for peace and cooperation. That mercy, combined with demonstrated capability, made humanity far more dangerous than any conventional military power, because it meant they could not be dismissed as either aggressive expansionists or toothless pacifists. They were something else entirely, a species that genuinely preferred peace but was absolutely ruthless in defending their people when that peace was violated. The galaxy was still trying to figure out how to deal with that combination, still trying to find the right balance between friendship and caution, still trying to understand a species that could hide city-killing fleets while advocating for galactic harmony, still trying to accept that humanity was not what anyone had thought they were. And through it all, the defense network continued its patrols, silent ships watching over scattered colonies, ready to respond at a moment's notice, ready to defend the defenseless, ready to remind anyone who needed reminding that humanity protected its own with a ferocity that belied their peaceful reputation. That was the new normal. That was the galaxy after Veridian 7, a galaxy that had learned to respect the species that valued peace enough to prepare for war. A galaxy that had learned that when backup was called, what arrived might just change everything. And that terror, that uncertainty, that grudging respect would shape galactic politics for generations to come, all because one colony called for help, and what showed up was more than anyone expected, more than anyone could have imagined, more than the entire galaxy was prepared to handle. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage. And the galaxy would never forget the moment it realized what that truly meant.